Welcome back to the Happy Saver podcast. I'm Ruth, a personal finance blogger here in Aotearoa, New Zealand. Have you ever wondered about other people's money? Well, that's exactly why this podcast exists. Over the past 124 episodes, I've had the great privilege of sitting down with an incredible range of people, mostly Kiwis with the odd Aussie, because it's kind of fun to hear from our neighbours sometimes, who have generously shared the nuts, bolts and emotions of their financial lives. And we've talked about all sorts: their upbringing, income, debt, investing, business, housing, divorce, retirement, inheritance, generosity, mistakes they've made, and importantly, and probably my favourite part of each kōrero, their financial wins too. But today I'm doing something just a little bit different. I thought I'd give you a little update on what Jonny and I are up to. Now, if you have been listening for a while, you might remember that way back in 2018, I released episode number 12, and I called it It's All About Me. At the time, I thought it would probably be the only episode I'd ever record about our own money journey, probably because I didn't realise the podcast would still be going all these years later. But also, after all, my blog, The Happy Saver, has turned into a bit of a diary that has tracked our financial journey in detail for a decade now. And while the blog was about us and the rationale for the decisions we've made, the podcast is about everybody else. And while kind people do constantly tell me they love hearing these stories, people still ask me to document mine in a podcast. I realise that not everyone reads my blog, but you really should. And some of you only listen to the podcast, so you might not ever see my whole picture. And you might be wondering, who on earth is this random woman yapping away in my ears right now? So today I thought we would fix that. Now, this isn't going to be super detailed, but I'll give you a few numbers to catch you up on the last 8 years. My blog is still probably a better place because all the reasoning around our decision making and our numbers are there. But I thought I'd give it my best shot to update you on the last 8 years of mine and Jonny's financial situation. It's not easy interviewing yourself, I can tell you that much. Right, before I crack on, let me give a warm shout out to the one piece of software that I simply could not be without. And I actually give full credit to Pocketsmith for consistently telling me what we earned over the days, the months and the years, and what we spent. And super importantly, it showed me that clear gap between those two numbers, and it's that gap that we invested, and those investments are what have allowed us to semi-retire and reach Coast Fi. I'm a massive fan of creating multiple sources of income because I believe it makes you more financially resilient. However, you need to be sure that extra hours spent working on a side hustle translate into actual money in your pocket. Pocketsmith helps manage secondary income from a side hustle by integrating various financial accounts, providing customizable budgeting and cash flow forecasts, and offering a detailed dashboard unique to each side hustle for transaction management and net worth tracking. If you want to supercharge your finances with Pocketsmith, have we got a deal for you. Happy Saver listeners get a whopping 50% off your first 2 months of Pocketsmith's foundation plan. To get your deal, go to pocketsmith.com/The Happy Saver. That's pocketsmith.com/The Happy Saver. When I recorded that original episode back in 2018, we were debt-free, and we still are, and still very much in accumulation mode, where we were depositing as much money as we could into our investments. I've looked back, and over the last 8 years, we have managed to invest somewhere between $15,000 to $30,000-ish a year. Plus, there was one standout year where we received a final insurance payout from the Canterbury earthquakes. We've been focusing on increasing our net worth while optimising for a fun life. We've been automating our banking and watching the basic but effective graphs I create to track our money as it painstakingly slowly creeps upwards. A lot has changed in the way we invest, but also in our lives. Our daughter was only 11 and she has now left home, and I've blogged a lot about how we helped her financially prepare herself to do this. We educated her about money, and that's a whole other story that I won't go into today. Back in 2018, both Jonny and I had part-time jobs, he as a graphic designer, me working in office administration. And now we don't. We've been methodically working ourselves into a position where we can let that income go. We've been through a fair few share market drops and crashes, and even more all-time share market highs. And now, in 2026, we have essentially both ended up working for ourselves with the Happy Saver. Plus, we both fill in at our old jobs if asked. And we seem to have a knack for finding extra income here and there each month. Each year we set ourselves the goal to make another $10,000 somehow, and we literally have no idea how, but our antennae are always up for the opportunity to earn, and somehow we always do. So 7 months into this year, we have already made $11,000. And how did we do this? Well, by selling stuff on TradeMe, saying yes to various one-off work opportunities, such as a local business paying Jonny for some graphic design, me filling in at my old workplace, a job I always enjoyed, and I've even done some paid research gigs and mystery shopping, which is always pretty interesting. So these days we call ourselves Coast-Fi or semi-retired, and our investments have grown to such a point, which is about $800,000 at time of recording. That means that without investing any more, they will continue to grow on their own. And this is the pretty cool bit. It has not happened yet, but if our income isn't quite enough one month, we could sell and spend some of our investments if we feel the need to do so. So that's kind of why it feels particularly timely to do this update episode in mid-2026 as we move ourselves into this next phase at the ages of 52 for me and 53 for Jonny. These days, we have a ton of freedom over our time, which is how I've been finding the time to make this very podcast. So if you've ever wondered whether years of budgeting, investing into our KiwiSaver and a single global ETF, talking about money with thousands of people, and making intentional financial decisions are actually worth it, well, perhaps our story can help answer that. But the short answer is yes, it is absolutely worth it. Now, last episode back at the start of 2018, our total net worth was about $925,000, but most of that figure was our paid-for house, with just $165,000 of that total figure actually being invested in the share market, in various investments and KiwiSaver. We had quite the mix of bits and pieces of other investments on the go, but the bulk of it was in our KiwiSavers, who were both with low-fee provider Simplicity, who was kind of the new kid on the block, and the provider responsible for telling every other KiwiSaver provider they were kind of shafting their customers with their high fees, and many still are. We had moved our KiwiSaver from ANZ to Simplicity and invested in Simplicity's highest risk fund that they offered at the time, which was their growth fund. When they launched a high growth fund quite a few years later, we moved to that. And we seem to have learned the lesson early on that our KiwiSaver needed to go to work for us, and it needed to be in a high growth but very low fee fund to do that. Low fees, which is a fee in my mind of less than 0.5%, are good. And it means the fund provider takes less of your money, leaving more of your money invested to compound over time for you to spend in retirement. I learned by looking at the fees and returns of other KiwiSaver providers that paying a higher fee does not mean a higher return, and Sorted Smart Investor is still a really good comparison website to use to compare funds. Back then we still had some individual Meridian shares bought when the government sold it off, which were doing quite well, and we were also investing in ETFs, the Smart New Zealand Top 50 ETF, a property fund, and also the US 500 ETF. Each had small but growing balances due to us really starting to take an interest in them and invest more money. And over time we invested more and more heavily into just that US 500 fund, which did really well up until more recently. We also enjoyed the experience of owning real gold for a while. It was kind of a good party trick to pull it out when people were around. How can something so small be so heavy and worth so much? And the 5 ounces that we ended up owning went up in value over the years before we sold it all. Now, we also had a teeny amount of Bitcoin too, just to see what it was all about really. But having only ever invested $1,000, we knew it was never going to make a difference to our wealth. So we tried all sorts of investments in small ways, and sometimes so I could experience it for myself, and also so I could write about it for my blog, and sometimes because we just genuinely thought it was a long-term investment strategy. The number of investment providers and products available has only grown over the years, and looking back at my spreadsheet now, I kind of sometimes shake my head and I think, well, why did I invest in this or that? But I know that at the time it would have made sense to do so given what I knew about money and investing at that time. So while I would never buy most of those things today because I know that the fees they charge are too high, the tax arrangements too confusing, or the product too sector or country specific, I also remind myself that every new investment taught me something. There's always plenty of noise and hype around investing, and it's only gotten more unique to you and in your face over the last few years. Every investment company genuinely believes its products are the right ones, and if they offer enough of them, someone in the audience will buy them. And let's not forget that they're all businesses trying to make a living by selling investment products. So I'm not surprised by what we bought and then sold. In my mind, investment companies just sit within a funnel. There's expensive ones, and there's a lot of them right at the top, offering actively managed products with humans constantly tinkering with them. And then there's cheap ones, and few of them, at the bottom of the funnel, offering a small selection of low-fee, tax-efficient, passively managed funds. And it took me time to sort out which was which. And the challenge today isn't finding a provider, it's sorting through everything on offer by those companies to find the products that fitted the brief of what I was looking for, which in the end was just to buy all the best companies globally in one fund. Over the years, Jonny and I became much better at doing exactly that, and we gradually worked out that for us, the best options in New Zealand were the companies InvestNow, Smart and Kernel. Not because every product they offer is great, but because each of them provides a simple, low-fee total world fund. But it's not like those funds were there the whole time, just waiting for us to find them. Oh no, they each began to sell them at different times, with Kernel actually only offering a total world fund in mid-2026. So the investing landscape is ever evolving, and it pays to pay attention. Now, as our confidence grew, by which I mean we invested money, it went up in value, and then we actually sold some to test that we could, we satisfied ourselves that it was not a giant Ponzi scheme, and that got us even more excited for our future. We steadily sold off all the bits and pieces investments that we had, moving that money into initially a smart US 500 fund, and then realizing that by only owning that we were missing out on other global companies, we moved into a smart total world fund. I stopped believing the marketing emails I received from all sorts of companies I followed about the promise of some up-and-coming investment, and instead I focused on what my own spreadsheet and the Kiwi-made portfolio tracking software that I use, which is called ShareSite, was telling me was working. As we cut and consolidated, I wrote about it on my blog, and today our investment portfolio is very simple. We hold 2 investments with 2 low-fee providers. Our Kiwi Savers and our daughters are invested in the InvestNow KiwiSaver Foundation Series Total World Fund with an annual charge of 0.06% and a buy fee of 0.5%. And our investments outside of KiwiSaver are with Smart in their Total World Fund with a 0.4% annual charge. This has become not only the simplest portfolio to manage, but counterintuitively the most diversified one too, because a Total World Fund holds around 10,000 companies from countries all over the world. So if there is a successful, massive company out there, we own it in this fund. But are we finished tinkering with our investments? Well, probably not. Investment companies, they start up, they evolve or close, products and fees change, so it's really important to keep an eye on what's happening. So, for example, with Kernel just launching a low-fee Total World Fund, there is more competition in that market now, and competition generally lowers fees, so that's something we will continue to watch. But this leads me to a point I want to make about becoming a calmer investor. Because I document so much of our financial journey, every time a new investment product hits the market, it gets hyped, and I do receive emails asking my thoughts about it. Am I going to sell what we own and switch? Well, the answer almost always is no. One of the biggest lessons I've learned over the years is that constantly chopping and changing is really good for your wealth. Instead, once you've found an investment product that suits your requirements, the best thing you can usually do is stick with it. So that doesn't mean you shouldn't monitor it or get complacent. It just simply means you shouldn't rush to act on new information. Measure twice, cut once applies to woodworking as much as investing. These days I spend a lot less time looking for the next great investment and a lot more time monitoring the ones we already know are working. Given that both InvestNow and Kernel now offer lower ongoing fees than Smart's Total World ETF, many have asked me why we haven't switched. Now, in my New Zealand specific session on Rebel Finance School with Alan and Katie Donegan, which you can find in my As Featured In section of my website and also on YouTube under Rebel Finance School 2026, we ran the numbers on that question. Now, over the long term, with its lower fees, InvestNow came out ahead, followed by Kernel and then Smart. Now, for us, fees are indeed important, and all three of these providers are low fee in comparison to the rest of the finance industry. But so is ownership. And when we buy the Smart Total World ETF, we own the ETFs directly. They're recorded in our name using our unique common shareholder number on an independent share registry. And if we ever want to sell them, we can do that through any online share broker that we choose. With InvestNow and Kernel, it's a little bit different. You own units in their managed fund instead, and the managed fund owns underlying investments on your behalf. Legally, there are strong protections in New Zealand that keep investors' assets separate from the investment provider, so for most people, there's very little practical difference. But this is where personal finance gets personal. We all have hang-ups, and our experience with waiting years for ownership and insurance matters to be sorted for our Christchurch house after the Canterbury earthquakes, we've realised we place a high value on having investments registered directly in our own name. Could we save in fees and therefore have a higher investment balance over time by changing providers? Yes, but we would also move to a different ownership structure. We've only been fully invested in the Total World Fund for just over a year, so the difference in fees isn't significant enough yet to make us want to move everything. So for now, we're happy with where we are, but we will keep an eye on it. And I think that's a good reminder that investing isn't always about choosing the mathematically perfect option. Sometimes it's about choosing the option that lets you sleep well at night. Given we were tracking our net worth each month and using ShareSite to see the returns on those investments, I could see that year upon year, the amount we had invested was growing far in excess of what we actually contributed from our take-home pay. Every week we had an auto transfer of money into a separate bank account sinking fund, and once a month I invested all of it and more if we had cash in our cheque account to spare. And in the last 8 years, we have not missed a single month. Even through 2020, when employment felt pretty uncertain, we invested. And investing always took priority, and that habit has really paid off for us now. Then and now we use sinking funds with our bank, had an emergency fund, and were clearly planning ahead to cover future expenses with cash. And since we paid off our mortgage in our early 30s, this was pre-kids and remember that houses were cheaper then, using debt in any form was never on our radar, and it still is not. And our debt-free status has been a position I've had to justify quite a lot over the years when people ask us why, given our equity in our home and our investments, we don't borrow against it to take on debt to buy rental properties. Well, I've got a few reasons. I don't want to run a property business, and the only people I see who do make money out of property treat it like a business and manage all aspects of it themselves, from buying to managing to selling. And another reason is because all the people I knew who owned rental properties were all still working at their day jobs and managing property out of hours, and it's a lot of work. And each time I see someone on Instagram touting property as passive, well, I actually think I do laugh out loud. The fact they are standing in their rental property saying they don't even spend any time managing it is quite ironic. It is rare for me to meet someone who owns a rental property or two who has a plan for how it will provide income, and more particularly when. So don't get me wrong, I am not anti-property. We need rental properties. It is just not for me. So choosing to get out of debt and remain debt-free has been life-changing, and I still think getting out of debt is a great idea. I'm a pretty simple person, and staying debt-free suits Jonny and I just fine. We have still grown wealth without it. Now, I'm super grateful to the likes of people like J.L. Collins, Katie and Alan Donegan, and Mr. Money Mustache, who showed us years ago that if you consistently take a piece of your take-home pay and invest it into a low-fee, passively managed ETF that tracks the FTSE Global All-Cap Index, you will make money. It just seems a lot easier to me to do it this way. And American Dave Ramsey says your biggest wealth-building tool is your income, and he is not wrong. So we have consistently taken a small slice of all of our income and invested it. Looking at all those investments we had in 2018, they were not optimal by today's standards, but we were clearly doing the best we could with the information we had and what was available to invest in at the time. We had zeroed in on the fact that low fee and high growth were important wealth builders. Now, our net worth was growing month on month, and by late 2019, we ticked over the $1 million net worth point, which included our home. It was quite the milestone, and I do recall that moment where I gathered the whānau around the laptop and I said, check this out. And we went out to dinner to celebrate, and I'm a big fan of celebrating milestones that are important to you. Did the share market then drop due to COVID? Well, yep, it sure did. But it didn't matter because by then I knew we were on the right track, and a share market drop was not something to fear. Instead, it was an opportunity to continue to invest as normal, except with shares on sale, and the same amount of money could then buy more units. While it is so true that a share market crash is the share market going on sale and that it's a great time to buy, I know that was actually not our reality. We had already been investing as much as we could for years, and any cash we had in the bank, it was there for a reason. So we didn't have wads of cash to invest and take advantage of that share market crash. So we stuck to our habits and we just invested as normal. And now in 2026, those cheap buys are worth a whole lot more today. When I sat down to record the first episode I did about us in 2018, I really thought I had a pretty good handle on money, and looking back, I actually probably did. We were doing the basics on living on less than you make really, really well. And I'm always saying to people, just start where you are at. And Jonny and I did that. And with each passing year, we made better decisions. But I also had a lot to learn, and I can see I was pretty excited to learn it, and using our blog to document that process and the progress that we made. While I read books and blogs and I listened to podcasts, over the years I've also talked to thousands of people about their personal finances, and every single conversation has taught me something, whether that's what to do or what not to do. Now, on the what not to do topic, I've observed that a lot of us drag the financial baggage of our parents into our current lives. Now, my parents were and are awesome people, but growing up, I knew what it felt like to have no money at times, and it felt pretty awful. So from a very young age, I decided I wanted better. But without financial role models or the ability to know where to look for sound money advice, it took until I reached my late 20s where I actively went looking for information on how to manage money better. Jonny's upbringing was different to mine. His mum managed the family money really well, with no stress around money that he can recall. So when Jonny and I met and combined our finances, which we pretty much did from the start, he already had some pretty good habits and I was super keen to learn, meaning that from that moment we both had equal say, no matter who earned it or spent it. We share decision making and don't do anything unless we both agree. And we just chucked out the money habits which had held us back, or particularly held me back, and kept looking for ways to be better. There was one key money habit I loved about my dad though, and that was his generosity, and that is a habit I have very much kept. So when I meet 30, 40, 50, 60-year-old people who tell me, wow, I was never taught about money, or money was stressful growing up, and they use it as an excuse today, I tend to be a little bit blunt, sorry about that, and I tell them to just kind of stop with the excuses and just let it go, because as an adult, you know what not to do, so now you get to be in charge of money. In the course of talking with others, I've been able to think hard about money and relationships. Importantly, Jonny and I have always treated our money as one, regardless of who earned what. And it comes down to trusting each other to always be working in each other's best interests. And when our daughter joined our team, we included her in our frequent money korero. We ripped up and burned the stupid taboo about not talking about money. Given we use it every day, we talk about it every day, it seems kind of pretty obvious to me. And I think that talking about money is one of the most valuable things we can all do, and it's not a big deal to do so. Now, if I could be blunt enough to offer just one piece of relationship advice, it's to not marry a financial idiot or someone who is so at odds with you that you can never get along with them financially. And don't take financial advice from people who have no money. If you fight over money, it's a red flag. My parents used to fight about money until my mum more or less gave up arguing. It was always a bone of contention, which made her feel insecure, and after my dad died, she actually enjoyed handling money because for once, she got to do it her way. You kind of have to be able to see the other person's side of the conversation or the argument, and you have to find a way to understand each other and find common ground. And I think my podcast has shown kind of every iteration of finances in a relationship, and I'm just forever grateful that Jonny and I have zero friction about money. Yes, we have some great discussions, but never arguments. Generally, I'm enticing him to spend thousands of dollars on something, and he is the fiscally cautious one that explains the pitfalls of my kind of YOLO spending. So together we reach a middle ground where we are both happy. Now, Jonny's favourite saying, which we are pretty sure he made up himself, is to ask, will spending this money put us backwards in our future? Over the last 8 years, a key habit that has really helped us get ahead is that we track our net worth on the first of the month. Having done it for so long now, it shows me a direction of travel, and we are absolutely travelling in the right direction financially. My favourite stat to pull out from my own data at the moment is to calculate how long it is taking our investments to double, including what we have contributed and share market returns, and it's currently doubling every 4 years. Can we guarantee this will continue? Well, of course not, but for now it is. And tracking your net worth is the one tip I always give people who are just starting out. These days I tally up our KiwiSaver and our one ETF investment because the total of these two figures is the asset or the engine that we are building to power our early retirement. I quickly work out what 4% of our investments is, and in theory, that is how much our assets could pay us each month, if we wanted them to. In 2018, it was just $600 a month, and today it is $2,700 a month. Then I tally up our cash, and then our home. Back in 2018, we did include our house in our net worth, but over time, I have calculated that separately. Why have I done that? Because while we do own it in full, it doesn't generate an income. If I could go back and have a chat with 2018 Ruth, I'd probably tell her that yes, her excitement on the first of the month was warranted and very helpful to her future self. Those systems that she'd built, while basic, will continue to work just fine. It's actually quite fun to look back at our January 2018 net worth, where we had just $165,000 invested, and compare it to today where we have $800,000 invested. Our total net worth, including our house and cash that we hold in the bank back then, was about $850,000, and today it is $1.8 million. So small habits lead to big results over time. I know that everyone tracks their net worth a little bit differently, and to that I say, you do you. As long as you are consistent with your calculations and they are motivating and meaningful to you, do it however you like. Another key habit is we know what we earn and what we spend. We budget, which far from being restrictive is freeing. We enjoy spending our money, especially on the fun stuff in life. But it's been in moments of crisis, such as the uncertainty of COVID, or transition, such as me and then Jonny giving up paid work, that budgeting really comes into its own, and it helps us be sure we are making enough or have enough to cover our expenses. We use sinking funds, which is just a separate bank account for a particular expense, and we use them extensively to help us plan for future spending. These things are like magic in that they build while I'm not even paying attention. And much like tracking your net worth, it doesn't really matter how you budget, just that you do. I started off with pen and paper and then a spreadsheet on my computer, which I never managed to keep up to date, before finally using some decent software. And yes, it's one that I pay for, but it was a game changer. It was while researching this episode that I realised I had actually started using Pocketsmith in July of 2018. And therefore, I can tell you with 100% certainty that back in 2018-2019, in a one-year period, we spent $9,400, which is $180 a week, on groceries. We spent $2,495 on council rates, $2,320 on electricity. And it looked like a very low-income year for us with a total income of just $40,000. To update those figures for you today, we spent $12,500 or $240 a week on groceries in the last year, which has increased, but it's fine because it's below the $250 a week budget that we actually set ourselves. We spent $5,000 on council rates, which is quite the climb, and $5,100 on electricity. Our income over the last year has been the highest at about $130,000 after tax. And it's a mix of happy saver income, investment income from selling a few $1,000s here and there, Jonny's income, plus extra bonus income. It's safe to say our income comes from multiple sources. And what I really like about Pocketsmith is that I spend very little time organising the data, which is all my bank transactions, and most of the time using that data to just play out scenarios. So now, given that Jonny just finished his part-time graphic design job in July, we've just kissed about $40,000 a year of income goodbye. These are transactions that won't be showing up in Pocketsmith anymore, so I'm busy working out how to adjust to that drop in income. And this is what budgeting does. It just lets you think about the story behind each number and adjust your finances and your life to suit. In the last 12 months, our base spending adds up to about $65,000 a year now. Life has certainly gone up in price, I've found. You've probably found that too. Plus, we spent another about $20,000 on top of that for things like travel. We updated our car this year and supporting our daughter at university. So why do I think about this total expense in two different numbers? Because $65,000 is essentially spending to cover housing, insurance, food, and just the necessities of life, and the rest are expenses which, if push came to shove, we could stop. If we want to live our life the way we want to live it, which included budgeting to help our daughter at university, well, we'd better work out how we are going to pay for it ourselves, because no one else is going to. Over the last 8 years, with every paycheck we received, we prioritised investing first. We paid ourselves first, if you like. In late 2024, we moved our KiwiSaver for a third time since we started it in 2007 to the very low-fee Invest Now KiwiSaver Foundation Series Total World Fund, and we now have a combined balance of about $325,000 in our KiwiSavers. My KiwiSaver balance is higher than Jonny's, with the main reason being that many years ago I transferred home Australian superannuation that I had into my KiwiSaver fund. Plus, when I took 4 years off to be a full-time mum, I continued to voluntarily invest in my KiwiSaver from our take-home pay. And just a quick note on Aussie Super. If you've done your dash in Australia but have no plans to return to work, it makes sense from a kind of keeping life simple perspective to just roll it into your KiwiSaver. When first I, and then more recently Jonny, stopped working for an employer, we stopped contributing any more money to our KiwiSaver funds. Controversially, we both choose not to make voluntary contributions and tie up $1,042 a year each into an investment that we can't access for another 12 to 13 years, all for a government bonus that they have whittled down from $1,042 and are pretty keen to scrap of just $260. Because we want to retire early, we need our investments outside of KiwiSaver to be as large as possible. So up until recently, that is where our investing money has gone. When I do a little bit of work for my old employer, they do still pay into my fund, so I do get paid a government contribution in proportion to what I contributed, but I'm not adding any more. I think the part that self-employed people often miss is that they don't pay into KiwiSaver because there are no additional benefits to doing so, but they don't invest elsewhere either. Well, we did. And since selling and consolidating our investments, the only one we have outside of KiwiSaver now is that smart Total World Fund ETF, which now has a balance of about $480,000. After fees and taxes, this fund has a 5-year return of 13.6%. So, Back at the start of 2018, our investments totaled about $165,000. A year later, they were sitting at $185,000. By 2020, we'd reached $248,000, then $300,000 in 2021, and $330,000 in 2022. Now, it was in this year that we received our one and only windfall, which was a final insurance payout from the Canterbury earthquakes, which allowed us to make a lump sum $60,000 investment. So by 2023, our investments reached $400,000, and then something interesting started to happen. It felt like compounding was beginning to do more of the work. And along with our regular monthly contributions, our balance grew to $475,000, then $595,000 at the start of 2025, and by the beginning of 2026, it had reached $680,000. Then, and this brings us to now, halfway through 2026, we passed the $800,000 mark. The balance moves about a bit in direct proportion to how wide the President of the United States opens his gob. Now, while he is not normal, share markets being volatile absolutely is. Looking back over those numbers, what stands out to me isn't any particular milestone, it's how ordinary the journey was. We simply kept investing as much of our take-home pay as our budget would allow, month after month, year after year, and gradually the numbers started to gather momentum. We always had and continue to have an appropriately sized emergency fund of cash in the bank because stuff is always going wrong, that's just life, but it's based on sound numbers and it changes over time, depending on what's going on with life. But the lowest it tends to be is about $10,000 of cash in a high interest but accessible savings account with a trusted bank. And in preparation for Jonny quitting his job this year, we actually raised our emergency fund balance up to $18,000. To us, this represents 4 months of expenses at $4,500 per month if needed. And given Pocketsmith tells me what we do spend each month, this is an amount that feels appropriate to us, given we have additional sinking funds with our bank, where we are also setting money aside for known upcoming expenses such as holidays or car maintenance, vet bills and healthcare. Plus, with so much money invested in an ETF that we could access if we had to, we have options. Plus, we are still making income via the Happy Saver. Keeping about $30,000 to $35,000 of cash in the bank feels like the right amount for us for now. It took time to build it up, but we found this balance between cash being available when we need it, but not having too much laying around too. And it represents just 3 to 4% of our investment total being held in cash. The number crunchers who are listening might feel that this money is unproductive. It could be invested and earning, but money needed for emergencies or short-term spending simply has to be stored in a bank and not at the mercy of a volatile share market. That US president is quite yappy, remember, and I'd never want to take that risk. I'm always meeting people with unbelievably complicated financial arrangements, which they have cobbled together over the years. They motivate me to keep money simple. For Jonny and I, we deleted our credit card back in around 2018, simply because there is zero financial benefit for us to use one, and it just made budgeting that much harder. Given the surcharges added to many credit card transactions today, if most people ran their math, their credit card would be costing them. As you hear me say that, some people will be saying, but I make mine work in my favour, Ruth. But honestly, most don't. You simply don't need credit cards, and a debit card will suffice. We've never had an issue with fraud on it. Well, we did once, but the bank fixed it up pronto. And we use a Wise card when we travel. So yes, we travel internationally without a credit card. Now, unusually, and we kind of surprise ourselves when we think about this sometimes, neither of us have worked full-time for over 20 years, always part-time or sometimes not at all. Stress from the Christchurch earthquake stopped us working. My parents getting ill stopped me working. Having a beautiful daughter stopped us working. And now not wanting to work has kind of stopped us working, which, far from being concerning, actually makes us feel more at ease because we're not just staking our income on one employer. With money in the bank, money invested, and the ability to work where and when we want, it gives us flexibility. It is unusual, but we've been able to make it work and still invest. Over the years, our incomes have been very variable, and it comes in from different sources. And unexpectedly, our main source of income is actually now the Happy Saver. But I still fill in from time to time at my old job when needed, and I really enjoy going back there. And there's a tip for you. Don't burn your employment bridges as you exit the building. Jonny literally just finished his 2-day-a-week graphic design job and will now freelance for them if and when required. 2 to 3 times we have sold off less than 4% of our investments and used that as income, and typically it was for a holiday. And going forward, if we find we don't make enough money in a month, first we will hustle to find more income. Next, we would sell off a tiny amount from our investments in the knowledge that it will grow back. Now, it's for this reason, us potentially selling our investments, that we have more or less stopped investing into them, meaning that we are okay to earn less because we don't have to allow for investing around $30,000 a year, which is what we had been managing up until recently. So we are what's called Coast Fi, which means that we have enough money invested in a total world fund that it will continue to grow without further money being added. And had you told me in 2018 that I would effectively be running a business now which provided enough income for our whānau, well, I just would not have believed you. We never meant to create a business, and to be honest, I'm still not that much of a fan of the business side of things, but while I continue to love to engage with and help people think about their personal finances, I'll definitely keep at it. I do absolutely love it, although I'm always a bit stressed about how full my inbox gets. And people ask me, and you may be wondering, how we make money from blogging and podcasting. It is from affiliate partnerships and sponsorship from companies that we use. So thank you, Pocketsmith. I am also a freelance writer, plus I help people with one-on-one, what I call phone-a-friend video chats, which I charge an hour of my time for. But apart from that, in all honesty, most of what I do and what Jonny does is unpaid and voluntary, and I just spend countless hours answering the emails I receive. So if you are still waiting for a reply, just sit tight, I will get to you. Now, as I write this episode regarding our incomes, we are in a real moment of transition, having given up about $600 a week due to Jonny finishing up work. But we've planned for this, upping our emergency fund, upping our sinking funds, and being fully prepared to sell wee chunks of investments to make up any shortfall. And now we will just monitor things over the next 6 months. Because we have such a firm understanding of what we spend, we can make sure that it matches our income. And if it doesn't, we are still young and fabulous and not as lazy as I'm probably making us sound, and we can work a bit more. So one thing I do hope I have shown over the years is that wealth isn't reserved for people on enormous incomes. Jonny and I did once have pretty high incomes, but unfortunately for us, those incomes came and went before we learned about good money management, which is a bit of a shame, but there you go. Before discovering financial independence, we constantly upgraded our cars, our house, travel, and lifestyle just because we could and because we didn't know about investing. Any spare money in the bank was obviously there to be spent, but stopping doing that was what freed up more money to invest. So we have built our investments up to about $800,000 from incomes that range from zero, when both of us decided not to work for a bit, to probably a maximum of $130,000. But while our incomes then and now are variable, our money behaviours are not. Since we learned that we should, we have always paid attention. Now you might be wondering what we do with ourselves all day. Well, we kind of just have a perfectly nice time. I love to end the day reflecting on all I've done, with my goal being to kind of live the shit out of each day, if I'm honest. I look for moments of magnificence in each day. Today, for example, it was swimming 60 lengths in the pool, followed by a nice spa at the local swimming pool. And yesterday, it was out on the trails running. I give the Happy Saver a little and sometimes all of my attention each day. I've been at my computer all day today, having a perfectly lovely time writing this, for example. And we both volunteer a lot, whether that be at our local park run, or for me talking about money with local groups, or just locals one-on-one. I'm a very social person, so I'm in various groups and clubs, some of which I've created. Jonny less so, but for all the women listening who have husbands who just won't get out and do stuff because they don't think they need human interaction, well, I'm always pushing Jonny out the front door and out of his comfort zone. And I tell him that if we're going to be at home and together all day, we need to each get out and get some work stories to talk about over dinner at night. And bless him, he lets me bully him into being social to the point that I think he actually enjoys it now. He gives a lot of his time helping people with technology, mainly to do with podcasting, blogging, and graphic design. And my favourite thing is that we both love to exercise, and we live in central Otago, which is surely the best spot in all of Aotearoa. And my happiest place is trail running up in the hills behind the clock, if you know it, in Alexandra. Jonny's still recovering from his big accident earlier in the year, so his rehab is a little more mellow than my exercise, but we both walk a lot, and for next to nothing, we built a home gym for weight training. And people we've met via the Happy Saver are constantly emailing, messaging, phoning, and stopping in for coffee or dinner. So it's pretty safe to say that we couldn't kind of fit in a full-time job, even if we wanted to. We have built financial security in completely ordinary ways by spending less than we earned, being consistent with our spending and investing habits, being patient, which is pretty hard for me sometimes, and importantly, just making more good financial decisions than bad ones. And when I'm emailing people back and forth and helping them answer their question, I'll often sign off with a just keep going, because if you stick at it, create some good money habits, and run your own race, you keep moving in the right direction. What has been immensely helpful to us over the years is seeing people who are ahead of us financially. You can be what you can see, and people who are wealthy and kind, they give us something to aspire to. And what I came to learn about people and money is that when you share your numbers with people, they are not judging you, they are benchmarking themselves against you, and they use your information as motivation to keep going, or it might even be that they learn that they are actually at a point where they have enough. Financially independent people are the absolute best people to be around, because having enough means that with the money puzzle solved, they get to be more of what they already are. And from my experience, they are fun, motivating, positive, generous, and really optimistic people to be around, which is my kind of people. And I get a lot of joy watching other people enjoy their money. And when I look back at our own journey over the last 8 years, there was never one decision that transformed our finances overnight. Instead, there were hundreds of small decisions and behaviours, and most of them were pretty boring, but all those small actions added up to something quite substantial. And having grown up like many, with money often being a source of stress at home, I'd also congratulate myself on picking my moments for dispensing what I lovingly refer to as my financial wisdom to our little daughter, who then became a young woman who left home understanding how money works, who is now budgeting and investing on her own. She recently drew the line at tracking her own net worth, something I have always done for her anyway, and she said, "Mum, you seem to get a kind of weird thrill out of this, so you keep doing it." So I delight in picking up the phone on or around the 3rd of the month, because I don't want to appear too keen, and secretly delight in her logging into her KiwiSaver, her Sharesies Smart Total World Fund ETF, plus her bank accounts, and telling me the balances of it all. And just a note on Sharesies, while it is literally like the Mega Mitre 10 of money stuff, offering products and investments, 99% of what she doesn't need, it has been really brilliant for teaching her the habit of consistent investing over time. Their higher fee has been worth it for the education she has received. But in time, and as her investment value really starts to grow, I'll encourage her to a cheaper platform, whichever is cheapest and easiest to use at the time. She has a degree of understanding about money that most adults don't have yet, and I can tell you that it is 100% true that the younger you start investing, the greater the compounding effect. Her net worth is now approaching the $70,000 mark at the age of almost 19, and it's simply come from us contributing a total of about $100 a month into her KiwiSaver since birth, and an ETF outside of KiwiSaver when they became available, until such time as she earned income herself, and then she has invested half of every dollar ever made, which is a 50% investment rate, and that's soon compounded into real numbers. And now that she's at university, she's actually applied the 4% rule to her total investments, and that is giving her a weekly cash allowance to live. I encouraged her to do that so that she could really understand how investments can pay for your expenses. The more she has invested, the more income they could pay her. She also works her tail off in the summer holidays to make as much money for university as she can, and she is paying her own way as best she can. And because we see her contributing and trying, Jonny and I happily make up the shortfall. 18 months before she left home, I actually signed her up to Pocketsmith, and I got her budgeting her income and expenses in preparedness for heading off to university, where she would be paying for larger bills, all of which she now manages herself using a mix of income from money she's earned and saved, money we give her, and investments that she sold off. Now, I've actually written a lot on my blog over the years about why we don't want her to have student loans and how we have taught her about money over the years. And what I find particularly interesting about her is how disinterested she is in learning about money. But she still learned it anyway. Much like tidying her room, learning to cook, or just generally being a decent human, she didn't get a pass on learning about money. I think if I'd have had a daughter who was really into this stuff, I would have thought all kids were. So she's been a really good teacher for me, reminding me to tailor my approach when helping others, because everyone needs to learn about money, but everyone learns differently. Righto, I'm almost at the end, but before I wrap up, I've just got another quick message from today's sponsor. If your finances are holding you back from living the life you want, try Pocketsmith out. They've got the tools to help you make money management easier. And have we got a deal for you? Happy Saver listeners get a whopping 50% off your first 2 months of Pocketsmith's foundation plan. To get your deal, go to pocketsmith.com/thehappysaver. That's pocketsmith.com/thehappysaver. What I've learned from our financial journey and others is that there is no end point. When people ask me now whether we've made it, well, I kind of don't really know how to answer because life just has so many variables that each impact the other. I've still got decades to live. And back in 2018, I know I would have had a thrill at having $200,000 invested. And that would have felt like a lot of money because it was. I would have been happy with that figure, but I would have been instantly starting to gun for $300,000 invested. So now that we've got $800,000 invested, it's a lot and I'm happy with that amount, but yeah, I'm pretty impatient to get to $1 million. Now, while I dream about winning lotto, I am never going to buy a ticket. So the only way we are going to get to $1 million and onwards is by continuing on the path we are on. Yes, you can work out your perfect investment balance, your retirement number, and the free personal finance course, Rebel Finance School, which you will find online, is the perfect tool to do that. But one thing I know to be true is that life will always want to stress test your plans, and that is perfectly okay. I think the key takeaway for us is that more money simply gives us more options, and for us at all times, our motivation is to live the most awesome life we can, regardless of our net worth. We've had some ups and downs over the last 8 years, but being the optimist I am, we've had a pretty good time too, and I only expect things to improve. I guess I would say I've enjoyed the mental challenge of it all. I don't know anyone else who lives their lives quite like Jonny and I do, and when Jonny and I come up with ideas, we are happy to give them a try, such as leave Christchurch and move to Alexandra, such as being stay-at-home parents, working part-time and then both giving up those perfectly good part-time jobs, creating a blog and a podcast and then monetizing it, and not only growing investments, but actually selling little bits of them too. But our greatest challenge is probably yet to come. We are now embarking on an experiment of sorts, and that is to find the balance between making enough income to cover our needs, being prepared to sell off investments to cover any gap, all while being 12 to 13 years out from traditional retirement age of 65 when we get our New Zealand superannuation and when we get access to our KiwiSavers. Will it work? Well, I hope so, but if it doesn't, we'll just adjust. We hovered over the idea of selling and downsizing our house this year, and that is still an option. And I think that is the point. We all have options. And most of them, if you really think about it, are pretty good. One thing I do often think to myself, though, is what might we be worth today if we both actually worked full-time jobs and therefore earned more? But every time we thought about actually giving up more time and freedom to earn more, to invest more, we were kind of like we just didn't want to do it. So yeah, I'm very happy with the progress we have made over the last 8 years. And I know it to be true that you don't have to earn a fortune to become financially secure. You just have to manage the money you do make well and enjoy yourself and help others along the way. So there you have it. I hope you found that mildly interesting. And if you'd like to get in touch, you know you can find me over at thehappysaver.com, where I've been writing about money, investing, and life for 10 years now. If you sign up for my fortnightly email, I'll also send you links to articles and podcasts and books and just other resources that I think are genuinely worth your time. Thank you so much for listening. I hope this episode has encouraged you, whether you're just starting out or you've been on your financial journey for years. If you've taken one thing away from today's conversation, let it be this: your financial life doesn't have to look like everyone else's. Build something that works for you, be consistent, and don't underestimate what small, sensible decisions can achieve over time. And you know what I'm going to say next. If you enjoyed the Happy Saver podcast, I would really appreciate it if you shared it with your friends, workmate, or somebody in your whānau. The more we talk openly about money, the easier it becomes for all of us to make better financial decisions. So until next time, happy saving.